Good morning and a very warm welcome to the latest Irwin Mitchell webinar. There are a lot of you tuning in this morning and I wanted to take this opportunity to thank you for registering for this event and for taking the time out of your working day to join us. It's great once again to bring together our clients, colleagues and the wider community for what promises to be a really interesting webinar. The title of this webinar today is The New Normal, Vocational Rehabilitation, Serious Injury Clients and Covid-19. Now in July of this year, today's presenter and I'll deal with introductions in a moment, gave another webinar, again focusing on vocational rehabilitation and strategies for implementing such therapies under COVID. This webinar is not a repeat of that, but more like the second part in that series. This time with a longer range view. We were 3.5 months into lockdown back then and well, we're a lot further in there now. We now know for sure that the consequences of COVID will be both long lasting and far reaching. Now I've seen the guest list for today's webinar and I can tell you that we're well into 3 figures and no doubt a great many more will view this presentation on YouTube or via irwinmitchell.com. Links to both will be provided later on by our team. It seems to me that there are 2 main reasons why so many of you have joined in. Firstly, you know Katya to be a thoroughly engaging presenter and possibly the most enthusiastic ambassador for vocational rehabilitation services ever. Secondly, practitioners across disciplines continue to be challenged by COVID and must look for innovative ways to continue to deliver rehabilitation in all of its forms to our clients. Our clients are, after all, at the heart of all that we do. We must devise ways to equip, encourage and empower our clients, particularly when the going gets tough, such as a Tier 3 lockdown. There are a couple of housekeeping matters that I need to touch on. The first is that the runtime of today's webinar is around 60 minutes. There'll be about a 35-minute presentation followed by 20 to 25 minutes worth of questions. Secondly, towards the right of your screen, if I've gone the right way there, you will see a Q&A panel. Now that's important. Towards the end of this session, there will be a link posted in there which will enable you to provide feedback on this webinar. And I'll be ever so grateful if you could spend a minute or so providing your feedback, good or bad. Your feedback allows us to evaluate and develop webinars such as this one. So get in touch and let us know what you'd like us to cover. The Q&A panel is also important, of course, for questions. Now, a great many of you have sent questions through before today, and thank you ever so much for those. Keep submitting them. We would like today to be as interactive as possible. OK, so who are we and what are we going to be talking about? Well, my name is Keith Cundall and I'm a solicitor in the Manchester office of Irwin Mitchell and have been for the past 12 years. I deal with a mainly brain injury caseload and I'll be today's host. But now the main event. We are very pleased once again to have Katya Halsall with us. Katya is a vocational consultant, functional evaluator and expert witness at Voc Rehab UK, a leading provider of vocational therapies across the UK. Now, as I mentioned a moment ago, the title of this webinar is The New Normal, Vocational Rehabilitation, Serious Injury Clients and Covid-19. Well, that's all from me for now. Katya, over to you.
Thank you, Keith, for the introduction and welcome everybody. I am delivering this talk in my capacity as a vocational rehabilitation consultant, and my company, Voc Rehab UK, has been providing vocational services such as career redirection, functional evaluations, as Keith said, and capacity for work assessments, as well as return to work programs for serious injury clients, people who have been absent from work for a very long time, quite often years. For those people who require job retention support because of their health limitations, and of course for adolescents with disabilities. In the last few months, I've delivered a number of presentations and training sessions just like this, focusing on vocational rehabilitation techniques. So let's talk about the new normal, vocational rehabilitation, serious injury clients, and COVID-19. As Keith said, this webinar is part 2. It is about how vocational rehabilitation practices have adapted to the situation we are all in and have been over the last few months. In my previous talk, I did say that vocational rehabilitation is anything that helps a person to return to work. And that in that vocational rehabilitation is different from medical rehabilitation process, in that our focus is not on care, but it is about enabling our clients to take independent steps and actions directed towards a future return to work outcome. Earlier in that earlier talk back in July, I did say that vocational rehabilitation is about empowering, enabling and encouraging our clients to achieve their return to work outcomes. And this is achieved by setting achievable, measurable goals and milestones and making incremental baby step and step-by-step progress. Back in July, I was talking about how important it is to ensure that injury clients focus on their preparation for returning to work. And this preparation means ensuring that they gain new skills, learn job-seeking techniques, refresh their CV, and ultimately become competitive and confident job seekers in a world that is likely to become even more competitive. This kind of preparation then is probably even more important now during these difficult times. So building on my talk back in July, broadly, today my talk will cover these topics. What has and what has not changed since July in terms of vocational rehabilitation. I will cover new and working and training opportunities for people and some relevant statistics as well. I will emphasize the importance of having a balanced point of view in relation to returning to work in any difficulties, particularly because of the daily doses of negative news that surround us. The use of motivational interviewing for maximizing clients' engagement. I will talk about the importance of recognizing the negative limiting beliefs that hamper our clients' confidence in their ability to look for work and engage in vocational rehabilitation. I will be talking about a 3-step process that prepares people for returning to work. And I will also discuss some resources and opportunities that are available to everyone. But first, I want to talk about magic. And as if by magic, the next slide just appeared. After my July presentation, I received a comment from a case manager with a vocational background who felt at the time that the presentation that I gave in July was not specifically COVID related, and it was just about vocational rehabilitation. Unfortunately, I didn't get to address that at the time, but I do want to address this now, right at the beginning of this presentation, because it's really important, I think. And I want to say that if anyone listening to that presentation or to this one hopes to discover some kind of magic trick or resource that no one ever heard about, some big secret, some $1 million solution, then please be prepared for a disappointment. There is no magic resource involved in the delivery of effective vocational rehabilitation during the COVID pandemic. I don't have secret resources, and I can't suggest miraculous opportunities. This really is about adapting what we already have and what we already do and working harder. So let me give you a simple analogy. Driving a car involves the same skills, whether driving at day, at night, in the sunshine, in the rain, or in the snow. But what we do have to do when driving a car is to adapt the circumstance to the circumstances. Fundamentally, the skills are the same, but the outside situation of rain or ice or daytime or nighttime will mean that we have to adapt our driving techniques to the conditions we find ourselves in. Similarly, vocational rehabilitation has core fundamental skills and techniques, and we have to apply those skills and techniques in different ways according to external circumstances and situations. There is no magic solution or trick that can suddenly appear out of nowhere that we can grab and make it all better. And the answer is, in my view, is for us to adapt. And this means working harder ourselves and encouraging and motivating our clients to work harder too. It always has been much more difficult to help serious injury clients to get back to work to suitable work, back to work to suitable employment. And there is no getting away from the fact that it is going to be even more difficult now. But we shouldn't give up, and we can't allow our clients to give up on themselves either, because, as we will see later, this pandemic is not all bad news for people with disabilities, mobility issues, and health limitations. But firstly, I mentioned working harder, didn't I? So what do I mean by that? Working harder means not accepting that there are no jobs available for our clients. There is no point of trying, not accepting that. Not accepting that there is no training available. In fact, in the last few months, a huge number of training opportunities have appeared online, short sessions, webinars, training courses. A lot of them are free. It means not accepting that there are no volunteering opportunities either. It means doing more research into the available options. In my view, the focus now should be on working harder. This means also working on our clients' motivation to engage and challenging their negative and limiting beliefs so that they do not have to stand in the way of their return to work preparation. But you know what? What about us, rehabilitation practitioners? And as if by magic, the next slide appears. Thank you, Natasha. Are we ourselves in our lives just waiting for a miracle, for someone to wave this magic wand and make our problems disappear? Are we trying harder ourselves, trying to adapt to the new normal, or are we just giving up? What is our own attitude towards the pandemic? Are we only seeing the negatives, or are we learning to see opportunities and set challenges for ourselves? Remember that our attitude will project to our clients. I invite you now, all of you, to think about just one thing that you have recently personally achieved in the last few months. A challenge that you set for yourself and completed. And if there isn't anything at all, then try harder, because this is what we need to do before advising our clients to try harder for themselves. The virtual presentation in July was about vocational rehabilitation and how we could all best help our clients during the ongoing pandemic. The plan was to host an updated presentation in the autumn when it all was anticipated that it would be better and we might be on the other side of the pandemic and seeing the light on the other side of the tunnel. But in the last few weeks, it appears that far from being on the other side of the pandemic, we seem to be at a state of a second wave. But let's look at what has and has not changed since my last talk here in July. What has not changed is the importance of work and being in work, the importance of being positive, the importance of being prepared, and the importance of being alert to change, both positive and negative. However, there have been also some considerable changes in the world around us. The world that we live in constantly changing, and so do working practices, working environments, and of course the types of work that we do is constantly changing. Fortunately, changes tend to be evolutionary, and so we easily adapt to it, almost without realizing. But you know what? Recent changes have been almost revolutionary. For example, perhaps the most obvious change have been that the office environment has now become a home office environment, and thousands of employees have quickly responded to the needs of the current situation. And in that respect, home working is a new normal. And my next slide will be changing about that. It doesn't need me be pointing out that this kind of change is not necessarily a bad change for our clients, especially those who would have mobility issues, getting to and from a place of work. An increased availability of home working roles is a consequence of the pandemic. And it is a consequence that does not marginalize or cast off our clients. There is nothing to celebrate or to be happy about the pandemic. But if one outcome is that our clients now have more of an opportunity to secure paid sedentary work they can do in their own time than they did before, then it is a consequence that we need to be aware of. And a consequence we need to make our clients to be aware of. And the other very notable thing is that there are a lot more online training opportunities that are available now. And this makes training and professional development, as I said before, much more accessible to our clients. So let's look at some statistics in the next slide. So no one knows for sure how many people now work from home compared to early March, for example, of this year. No one knows for sure how many companies are setting themselves up to employ home workers on a permanent basis, but there is some interesting information available. The Office for National Statistics survey about home working suggested that in April 2020, 46.6% of people in employment did some work from home. Of those who did some work from home, 86% did so as a result of the pandemic. More than 57% of people working in administration or secretarial positions did some work from home. And this is back in April, that was 6 months ago. So my feeling is that the shift towards home working is probably now greater than it was back in April, and not less really. There was a BBC article from August that said that 50 of the biggest UK employers questioned by the BBC said that they have no plans to return all staff to the office full-time in the nearest future. It is therefore very important that we encourage our clients to look beyond bad news that bombard them every day from news channels and social media. This pandemic is leveling out the job market for many sedentary jobs, and it seems very feasible that many employers are seeing that working from home may be more possible. The next slide will be talking about a survey. In October, an article in The Guardian suggested that Covid-19 has changed working practices for good. Most office workers do not intend to spend 5 days a week in the workplace since the Covid-19 crisis, it says. With both bosses and employees seeing home working as a long-term trend. So now I will talk about what have we heard positive in the last 6 months. Well, not very much at all. Words and expressions like lockdown, restrictions, isolation, distancing, disease, deaths, hospitalization, overwhelmed, and more have filled the pages of social media and the news. They all have negative connotation, and this essentially has an effect on our mentality, on our sense of identity, our actions, and essentially on our clients as well. And notice how our vocabulary has expanded with this new negative language. What I say about this is that having a balanced point of view is important. And I suggest that we help our clients to adapt to this balanced point of view about the world around us. For example, so Then there was an article a few weeks ago, saying that on the BBC News website, saying that 1,784 firms made plans to count 150,000 jobs back in July. Isn't that awful? It sounds tremendously awful. So when our clients read this, it is easy that they might just think, oh my God, there's no jobs. This is it. However, having a balanced point of view means that they should also know that there are 2.8 million active firms in the UK. And that means that people do work, do get jobs, do change jobs, etc. Another example is how people change careers and better themselves even now during the pandemic. Have you noticed now the BBC News launched CEO Secret series articles that they publish every week, and it focuses on businesses that have launched during the lockdown. The first article was about 3 graduates who created a company called Snackcess to provide gift boxes of healthy snacks for businesses to post to employees who work from home. The second article was about female entrepreneurs aged over 50. Now, during the pandemic, Faye felt that there was a gap in the market for dementia care aids with cultural symbols aimed at people who grew up in Afro-Caribbean households. She set up her online business, and it involves creating and selling these objects. And there was just one article just today as well, and focuses on moms setting new businesses as well. Have a look at it, it's fascinating. And in terms of jobs, having a balanced view also means looking for positives and things that are happening that may necessarily be a negative news. So for example, on the 14th of October, ASOS, which is an online retailer, announced that they have added 3 million customers as their profits soar during the pandemic. And what that means more jobs. On the 9th of October, Tim Hortons, which is a Canadian fast food brand, announced that they expand to the UK and they are creating 2,000 jobs. And of course, another example to consider positive jobs is Google positive news channels. So now let me talk about adaptability in my next slide. As humans, we have an incredible ability to adapt. And in fact, from an evolutionary perspective, this is why we are all here today on this planet, living in different environments and different social circumstances, because we are much more capable of actually adapting than we are imagining how we might adapt in certain circumstances. Think about it for a moment. If somebody had told us back in February this year that in a couple of months' time we will not be able to go to work, and we would not be able to see our families, and we would not be able to get out of the house for more than an hour a day, sometimes in some areas, and that most of the time everybody will be wearing face masks outside. I mean, we probably would have laughed, wouldn't we? And we simply would not have been able to imagine how we would cope with it. But in fact, we did, because we adapted and we continue to adapt. And some people adapt quicker and better than others. And that is not just because they're better skilled or better educated or more able-bodied, not at all. I think it is more down to attitude and to their motivation. A good vocational rehabilitation consultant is able to provide support all about motivation, positivity, empowering, challenging negative beliefs, and focusing on successful outcomes, meaning that it helps the clients to adapt this kind of support. And we can help our clients to see the world through a different colored lens. Let's talk about motivation. I find that there are 3 groups of people when it comes to motivation and return to work, and I did touch on that in my presentation in July. Group number 1, and these are the people who are 100% motivated and they need very little vocational support. Group number 2 are the clients who do want to return to work and who do want to be motivated, but they're not sure how to go about it. And group number 3 are the clients who are not motivated, are not interested in being motivated or helped to return to work. Well, it is fair to say that a significant number of these clients are not going to be persuaded to return to work from the group number 3, and won't be able to change their minds. We can reasonably expect that in the current circumstances, there are going to be many more of our clients who would fall into this category. However, what I would say here is that we should not necessarily take their rejection at face value, but dig a little deeper. Because in some cases, the rejection of any kind of work can stem from a feeling of hopelessness and anticipation of failure, and this can be overcome. Digging deeper is important to maximize client engagement. How to get someone back to work if they don't want to? How can we help? This is a question that I get asked very often, and there is a very simple and truthful answer. You can't get people back to work who don't want to go back to work. But the question to be answered with such client is, this is a question that needs to be answered, is why they don't want to go back to work. We should be exploring the reason for low motivation and what is behind it. It is often necessary to dig deeper into the background motivations. And that's why my next slide is about digging deeper. Oh, sorry, it is on the screen now. And to understand why the client has given up on the idea of work. Thank you, Natasha. Is it that they simply lack self-belief after all they have been through because of the health limitations and serious injury? Or is it the passage of time that has created a new kind of normal existence that just doesn't involve working? Of course, we know that not everyone is capable of working after a serious accident. We do know that. Functionally, they may not be able to do this. Or it might be that the client's life has taken a new direction and their priorities have changed. Working is good for people. And my suggestion would be to not to take the rejection of going back to work at face value, and certainly not before exploring background motivational issues and trying to address those. Let's take a look now at what might stand in the way of our clients' motivation. For example, negative limiting beliefs. I find that my clients' negative limiting beliefs are usually related to the areas which they believe to be their weakest points, such as their health, age, skills. Let me give you some examples. This is what my clients tell me now and then. I have a health limitation. No one will employ me. They will want somebody healthy. Or I am 48 years old. Employers would want younger people. Or I'm only 20. I have no experience. Employers would want a more mature person. Or there are no jobs. And so we must identify these limiting beliefs and challenge them respectfully and accordingly by devising a set of questions based on motivational interviewing. And the next slide shows some of the examples that I use, and it could be helpful. What makes you think that you cannot do this? When did you decide that you cannot do this? Do something, do work, prepare for work. How do you know that a person with a health deficit cannot find work? How do you know that? How your skills would help you to do this particular job or a job? What will happen if you try to apply for jobs? What is the worst thing that could happen if you try? And what is the best thing happen that if you try? And the next slide would be the idea, all of this and all of these things I'm talking about is really to help our clients to better themselves and prepare them for work in this new world. Otherwise, really, what's the answer do we have, guys, really? And what options our clients have? There's really two options, no more. Option number one is to give up. That's it. Or try harder. And there is an example of someone who did not give up and who did try harder. Ladies and gentlemen, I'll give you Daisy. Daisy sustained left dominant wrist injury and an injury of her right elbow, which meant that she could no longer work as a physiotherapist. When I met Daisy, she was out of work for 2.5 years. Her confidence was very low because of the injuries, and she also had to rearrange her wedding booked for May 2020 because of COVID. But Daisy was determined. Together, we work on how to focus on her abilities and what she can do. A work capacity assessment helped Daisy to focus on the appropriate occupational options in the healthcare industry based on her residual function. And looking at my slide, I can definitely tell you this is not Daisy's hand. Daisy undertook our 3-step back to work program, which she said helped her to increase her confidence. She was helped with her CV, job applications, and practicing job interviews. She had several job interviews during the support that we provided. When COVID came, Daisy continued volunteering, but this time she was doing volunteering in her support group via Zoom rather than face-to-face. She attended online training that was relevant to what she needed. Currently, she is working as a COVID support worker, and that is a job based at home, and it involves using a computer and telephone. And this is her first step in her return to work whilst looking for a more desirable option. I would say that Daisy is on the right track. So let's take a closer look at what kind of actions and milestones can help our clients. People who have been out of work for a long time tend to mentally drift further and further away from feeling confident enough to be able to contemplate ever working again. The route from getting from where they are now and being back at work, it seems to be a step so vast that it's almost beyond belief. And the passage of time makes that step appear to be bigger and bigger with every passing week and month and year. So it is important to devise a plan for these clients that includes incremental steps, bespoke support to suit the client's circumstances. Careful planning is key here. And then we need to be reviewing the progress and measure the outcomes, what has been achieved, what hasn't, and why. Let's take a closer look at this plan and what it might be, and at the form of stepped incremental process of closely aligned achievements. I call it a 3-step return to work preparation process. So we break this big outcome of that is returning to work or being in work into smaller steps and achievable milestones. And these milestones could be step number 1, researching volunteering options, applying for a part-time volunteering position, taking a skills refresher course at a local college or online, learning about job seeking and preparing CV, practicing job interviews. Step number 2 could be adding more days and hours to their volunteering and becoming a confident, independent job seeker by progressing with a vocational rehabilitation program. And then step number 3 would be typically applying for part-time, perhaps paid job, etc. These are just examples. So this next slide shows a sketch that our web designer created based on my drawing, and I think it illustrates the stepped approach to going back to work for an injured client quite well. The next slide is about this. In our recent chat with Keith, just before this webinar here, Keith raised the issue about returning to work opportunities for very vulnerable groups of clients, perhaps those with significant deficits following a brain injury, cognitive deficits, etc. And for perhaps for those people who may not be able to ever progress to paid employment and who generally will be more suited and greatly benefiting from volunteering. And Keith and I spoke about whether there may be less opportunities for these clients now, because they may be limited face-to-face supported volunteering, which is what a lot of them need. So what I did, I had a little look at the at some resources and website, and I did research. And what I would say, what I've discovered is that the British Heart Foundation is very supportive, generally always has been. I love these guys, of people with disabilities. Certainly my clients had benefited from working there in the past. So their website is saying that they are recruiting volunteers and that they're addressing the COVID situation quite well on the website, and the COVID protection is in place in their stores. So volunteering face-to-face, and what's more importantly, this supported type of volunteering for vulnerable clients appear to be still available. But I think what we need to do here is to dig deeper for our clients, with our clients, and call and visit a particular store. And that's how I got several of my clients these jobs in the past. Volunteering during the COVID pandemic can help to improve a person's skills, provide a sense of satisfaction, and enhance their CV. Plus, it allows quite often to attend free training. So the next slide is from my earlier presentation in July, and I'm just going to skim through it. Be My Eyes is volunteering opportunity, meaning that volunteers create a more accessible world for visually impaired individuals. You can Google all of this. Volunteer employers, please feel free to do so. Catchfire is volunteering for people with professional skills who consult non-profit organizations. Missing Maps, volunteers there help by mapping out areas where crisis teams and humanitarian organizations are trying to meet the needs of vulnerable communities and respond to disasters. Well, how about that? Zooniverse volunteers participate in research projects such as art and history, physics and literature, space and social sciences. And Grow Movement helps budding new businesses in developing countries. Let's take a look though in the next slide at current opportunities. So when I was preparing this webinar, I had a look also at the Do It volunteering website around the Manchester area. The vacancies are, and I thought I'll have a look where I am and what does it say. So this website showed 337 volunteer vacancies in Manchester, plus within a 10-mile radius. For example, and there'll be more obviously if you look at the wider area. And the examples of these vacancies include, I've included this information here because a lot of my clients think that volunteering is volunteering in charity shops only, which is great, but it's always better to know what other options are available. And listen to this. Vacancies include youth activity volunteer, mentor of a young person, retail shop volunteers and managers, visitors of vulnerable people, drivers, parent gym coach, befriender, singing group leader, treasurer, researcher, listening volunteer, maker of equipment for disabled people. And it looks like that there are both face-to-face opportunities and working from home opportunities. The next slide briefly shows the resources for those of our clients who want to prepare for work and to engage in this preparation, and brilliant websites that you can use, and Microsoft Office Word documents, CV templates are there. The National Career Services will tell you how to write your CV and prepare for interviews. There's tons of online low-cost and free courses online. You can see the resources here on the screen for you, and these courses include business, finance, accounting, self-development courses, IT, software, office productivity, design, marketing, lifestyle, photography, health and fitness, and courses in music and teaching. And Microsoft committed to helping 25 million people to acquire new digital skills. My next slide shows resources with the Open University as well. Did you know that there's a lot of free courses there, a huge number of free training available in health, sports, psychology, education, history, arts, languages, money, business, nature and environment, science, maths, politics, etc. And the next slide will be talking about the need about keeping your eyes peeled. I noticed many job advertisements. We talk about difficulties in getting jobs during COVID. I noticed a lot of job advertisements on LinkedIn and on Facebook. Keeping an eye on new support schemes for people who wanted to go back to work is important. For example, Kickstart is a government job creation scheme that is set up to run in November. Young people will be offered 6 months work placements to help them gain experience, skills, and confidence. In Scotland, there are proposals on the way for everyone aged between 16 and 24 to be guaranteed an opportunity at university or college, an apprenticeship program, employment, including work experience, or to participate in a formal volunteering program. And did you know that nursing apprenticeship funding gets a 172 million boost and increase in funding? At the end of September, we learned that new Lifetime Skills Guarantee would offer fully funded college course to all people over 18 in England, those who don't have an A-level or equivalent qualification. Well, my final word is this. So this is the new normal world for us. Do we and our clients give up, or do we adapt? Our clients can't get a job during the pandemic. It is clear that they have to try harder now, dig deeper, to build a motivation, to enhance their professional knowledge, to gain new skills, look for training opportunities, and maybe jobs allowing them to work from home, at least to begin with. This is our new normal now. And vocational rehabilitation support for injury clients is important now during the pandemic, even ever than before. Thank you.
Keith, you're on mute. No. Keith.
Sorry, I fell victim to the being on mute thing. Thank you, Katya, for that. We've got a very large number of questions to try and get through. I think the first one I've got to ask you, even though you've partially answered it, because we've had it a few times in a few different ways. And I think people are looking for reassurance that there are actually still jobs out there. I think we're all acutely aware of what's going on in the high street as regards charity shops. I appreciate what you've just said, slightly to the contrary in your experience, and that's interesting. But we also know, of course, that many offices and businesses are restructuring with regard to administrative roles and other sort of back office roles that many of our clients have historically fulfilled. Can our clients still find jobs, Katya? I mean, is it happening?
Yes, it is. It is possible to find jobs, and in my view, I think the word that comes to mind now is competition. And I think you know, our clients or whoever is changing jobs, that need to be learning to accept that they need to be more competitive and really work on their skills more than ever than before. I personally know people not necessarily related to work, as well as my clients, who did find jobs and change careers. And I've mentioned a few examples from the BBC articles, for example. But we need to be aware that the employers will be looking, they will have with less jobs available, they will have a lot more applicants applying for jobs. And I always say that it's about your skills, it's about your abilities when you're applying for jobs. So we need to prove to the employers that you have these skills, and this will increase chances your chances for getting a job. But it's not just you having skills, but so, for example, vocational rehabilitation could help to the client to understand how to present and sell these skills, if you wish, to the employer in the right way. But my short answer is yes, it may be more challenging, but it is possible to get a job during the COVID pandemic.
Yes, and what you just said there about the presentation of skills, I think leads on to the next question and may well go some way to answering it. But I wonder what you have to say to a client who has got over the hump of the motivation required to reskill or to get in the mind frame for work. But their sticking point, and I see this often, is how to deal with telling their colleagues or their employer about their disability, and when it's best to introduce that in the application stage, on the CV, or once they've got their foot in the door. What would you say about that?
As far as I know, there are no professional, of course, to disclose your disability, but there are pros and cons to disclosing it and not disclosing it, of course. If you do disclose your disability or health limitation rather, then your employer would know that you might need support, and there's specific support available for people with disabilities rather than for those who may be ill on a temporary basis, and employers do treat those two different categories in a different way. As to when to disclose a health limitation, I would, some of my clients prefer to do it when they submit the CV. That's entirely sort of up to you. And in fact, if the role that you're applying for does not, your health limitation, if it doesn't impact on the role that you're applying for, you don't have to disclose any health kind of conditions. Like I said, some of my clients prefer to put the details of the accident, some of it on their CV. What I would say is that I think probably if you have been offered a job, this is when you notify the employer of any kind of reasonable adjustment that you might have, and therefore disclose your health limitations. That's what I would say.
Yes, thank you. We've had a slightly change in tack a bit. We've had a lot of questions about the practicalities of vocational rehab, how it's being delivered at the moment, how long vocational rehab takes from the first letter of instruction, the assessment process, and so on. Because the main thrust of what you've been saying today is that don't hang about. We might need to adapt. We might need to dig deeper. But vocational rehab is so important for a number of reasons that aren't necessarily all tied into that person going back to work. There are lots of skills that can be developed and confidence and so on. So practically speaking, how are you going about working at the moment, and what does a typical lifespan of vocational rehab involvement look like, Natasha? Sorry, Katya. Natasha won't know.
That was a very long question, Keith, and very complicated one. So I'll try to answer my best. So in terms of the span of it, it's interesting. It's a good question because it's what aspect of vocational rehabilitation we deliver. And I know there are different practitioners who would be focusing on different things. And for example, for who is delivering more of a support of an occupational therapist or perhaps a support worker and helping a quite disadvantaged person after a brain injury, for example, to adjust and adapt to the activities and doing something enjoyable. People do call this assistant vocational rehabilitation. That would be a long-term assistance which might lead to supporting then this person in the workplace in maybe volunteering capacity. The way that I work is that I do like to establish very clear goals and timescales, and I work with specific category of clients regardless of the diagnosis. And the way to describe this category is that they are highly functioning clients, in that They are severely affected by orthopedic brain spinal injuries, but they are able to engage in some kind of work. And this is the typical clients that I work with, and this is the type of vocational rehabilitation that I deliver. And therefore, the first thing to do is to establish this end outcome. What kind of goals and outcomes we're setting for our clients? What kind of occupations may be suitable for them? And the first thing is quite a quick thing. It's an assessment, more often than not, either career redirection or capacity for work, and that's done within days. Reports are prepared within 5 working days, for instance, talking about timescales. And this report will actually outline all these milestones and outcomes and gradual steps that I've been talking about in my presentation, as well as potentially suitable occupations, in fact, a number of them in the report for the client to consider. I typically do between 3 and 5 options, narrow things down for the client. So then, once we've got the plan in place, once we set up this end goal and end outcome, we then start a vocational rehabilitation program. There are 2 different distinctive programs, and my preference would always be saying, okay, well, my estimation would be that a client should have a 12-week back to work program. This is the most popular program that we have. For those people who perhaps need more motivational support, then vocational case management may be longer and could be around 4 to 6 months. Now, when I'm saying 12 weeks program or 4 months program, these timescales can be reviewed, and the vocational program, whatever it is, it doesn't guarantee that the client will all of a sudden be motivated to go back to work or they will find a job. These programs are equip the clients with all necessary skills and resources to be prepared and confident. And I've noticed tremendous improvements in my clients' motivation after maybe 6 weeks. Some of them started applying for paid jobs, whereas just before we started the program, they were telling me, well, there's no chance, there's no jobs, I can't do it, I won't be able to do it. So in terms of the timescales, the change in those people who willing to try and accept with support that they could be engaging in return to work preparation is amazing to see, and it takes a few weeks. For a lot of people it's longer. Like I said, our back to work program is 12 weeks, and a lot of people found employment after this 12-week program. Some people didn't. Again, there's no guarantee, and sometimes it takes a little longer. So with all of this, I'm hoping I'm answering your very open, very complicated question with this very complicated answer I'm giving you. But I think that we always need to set the end outcome and the end timescales as to how long, based on the assessment, based on the client's own presentation and their goals, how long the vocational rehabilitation should be, and then we can review that.
Yeah, thanks, Katya. I'll try and make this a bit more straightforward this time. We've had lots of questions about the issue of motivation, because that featured heavily within your presentation. So trying to pull those strands together. You've said that there's lots to be positive about. We've got travel removing barriers to opportunities that were perhaps there before when somebody had to go to a place of work. We've got an issue concerning as I said, the geographical element, but also the opportunity of somebody working at home to take regular breaks or to pace themselves and so on. But how do you alter your language when speaking to somebody who is reluctant to leave the house or to engage with employment? Do you find yourself not using words like isolation or lockdown, or is it simply dwelling on the positives that actually people are still getting jobs?
I just speak to my native language, Russian. But in all seriousness, I don't promote simply the positive attitude will sort all the problems. So just think positive and everything's going to be great. I don't think this is useful, because that removes from the reality, really. And the reality, as I've spoken about before, is that our language now has developed with so many different words with different negative connotations. So we do use all the negative words as well, as in we acknowledge them. But as I mentioned before, having a balance point is important. And in my own talks with clients, when appropriate, I speak to them about the negative and limiting language. And if we're saying I can't, our brain will register I cannot do something, you know. And so using positive language is important without using the new vocabulary that we have because of COVID as well. And maybe as one example comes to my mind now. You see, you can frame the same situation differently in two different ways. So you could say, for example, that finding a job is difficult now, right? Or you can say that finding a job is challenging now. And all of a sudden, you know, you can sense perhaps a shift here. If it's difficult, who would want to do something difficult? Who would want to be, the analogy I quite often give with motivation is to do with fitness, you know, a lot of people struggle to engage in exercising because running in the cold and in rain, your legs are hurting, you can't breathe, and who would like that, you know? And but everybody likes a piece of cake, for example, because it's easy, it's pleasure. We all motivated to work towards easy things and towards pleasure and away from negative things. And I think the other thing when talking about language and motivation is for me to talk to my clients to help them to identify the benefits of work using more powerful and positive language. Again, because whatever we do in life, we really need to realize what's in it for me, right? If there isn't anything for me, if looking for a job is difficult, there's no jobs, times are horrible. Imagine in this short sentence, I've already said 3 negative words, and it imprints in our minds. But if these clients start to think, but you know what, it's challenging, but I need this because what would be the benefit of me going back to work? And if there is no benefit, if they don't see or they're not helped to see that benefit, they will not look for work. And we can't dig deep, we should dig deeper and try harder. But ultimately, it will be our client's decision as to what they want to do. Do they want to go back to work? Do they want to, if they can't functionally, do they want to prepare for work or not? So to summarize, having a balanced point of view, using powerful, positive language as well, whilst acknowledging that there's a lot of words with negative connotation, reframing and rephrasing difficult situations, just like I've given you this example. You looking for jobs is difficult, or looking for jobs is challenging. And if it's challenging, this kind of opens the door perhaps for opportunities for doing something, and exploring what the clients want to do. What's in it for them going back to work? Thank you, Keith.
Yes, thanks, Katya. Katya, we've got more questions than we've got time. Thank you to everybody who submitted questions, and I'm really sorry that we've not had time to get around to all of them. Again, Katya, thank you for the presentation, a timely reminder of so much, including strategies on how to adapt and dig deeper, and look not simply at the challenges of COVID, but the opportunities. There are plenty there. The removal of geographical boundaries, home working being a positive outcome for many people, which simply wasn't available before in such numbers as now. Thank you to all of our guests for joining us this morning and for your engagement throughout. You will shortly receive a link to the slides from today and a link to a recording of it so that you can watch again at your leisure. Please do leave feedback. And I would be grateful if you'd spend a moment filling out the form in the box to the right-hand side. This feedback is really valuable to us, and it allows us to evaluate and develop these webinars. Webinars are a weekly event at Irwin Mitchell. Tell us what you'd like us to cover, and we'll do it. Please visit irwinmitchell.com for more information about all of our services, including all things legal and to do with COVID via the Coronavirus Hub. Thank you to Natasha Allen and Lynn Carrick-Leary, and of course to our speaker Katya Halsall. I wish you all a very good week ahead.